Metroid Prime 20-year anniversary is here, and what better way to celebrate it than having one of the developers of the game to release interesting trivias of the game. Zoid Kirsch have been releasing new Metroid information up until the anniversary, and these are as followed. Number 1. The doors take a while to load up due to it loading the next room. I'm sure everyone who played Metroid Prime noticed when you shoot the door, it could take a while before the door opens. This is because only 2 rooms are loaded at one time. The room you are currently in and the room you are going into. This is so the game doesn't overload, making it run slow or potentially crash. When there are rooms with multiple doors, you may also notice only one door can be opened at a time, which is the reason above, to let the game run as optimal as possible. Number 2. Static interruption screen inflicted by the bombus are rendered by the game software itself instead of using a texture. The static noise screen when Samus gets hit by either the scatter bombu or the pulse bombu is actually the game's software creating the visual. What this means is that instead of using an image to create this effect, it was the game rendering the bits and bytes of the software onto the screen. Why this is used is because the GameCube had only 24 MB of RAM, so if the developers used an image or otherwise known as a texture, the static screen will come out blurry instead of the crisp look we have today. Number 3. Red equals damage. Because the GameCube doesn't have any shaders, the developers used the TEV, otherwise known as Texture Environment Unit, to blend colors, and so they used the TEV to render anything Samus hit to go red in order to give the player a feedback that they are doing damage to the enemy, block, and bosses. This is why when you attack an enemy and they don't go red, it means that you aren't doing any damage at all. Zoid Kirsch kept this consistency to help players understand what is happening. Number 4. An open source compression library gave us bigger and better rooms. This one is a bit harder to follow, but with the image provided by Zoid Kirsch, it makes it easier to understand, so here we go. Looking at the image above, when a room is being loaded behind the door, a compressed version is being loaded, which includes the geometry, texture, models, and game data. But the game will then need to load a decompressed version of the room as well, but instead of replacing the used memory block by the compressed room, the decompressed room used up another slot of the GameCube's memory instead. Due to the GameCube only having 24 MB of RAM, this was too expensive. Looking at the bottom image, in order to make a bigger room, the developers licensed an open source decompression library that assisted with memory fragmentation in order to allow the decompressed room to overwrite the compressed copy instead. This resulted in the game having more RAMs to play with, and therefore allow larger rooms to be created. Number 5. Metroid Prime went gold in the middle of October. What this means is that the game is ready for production and distribution before officially released on the 18th of November 2002. Zoid on the day brought in a poster and had everyone sign the poster to commemorate the day the game went gold. His signature is located just above Samus' head. Zoid seems to be really proud of what they have created on that day, and rightfully so, with Metroid Prime to this day considered the best 3D Metroid game and a contender for the best Metroid game ever along with Super and the recently released Dread. Number 6. Saving the game only requires 50 bytes total. How do they do this? Well, it is through the world layers. From how Zoid Kirsch describes it, these layers determine if something will be in the game world the next time you load the game file. Kind of like a switch. If it's on, it's in the game world, but if you collect something, that switch is turned off, and next time it won't be there. There are over 100 world layers, and everything from boss, to items, to the artifacts are tied to world layers, and they usually cost about 1 bit. Considering all the layers, it only costs 50 bytes to save the game. A GameCube memory card is 8 kilobytes. This means that you can have 160 different save files for Metroid Prime in the GameCube memory card, theoretically. Number 7. The developers had to put the GameCube into a freezer to test a bug. Shortly after Prime had shipped, Nintendo told Retro Studio that they had shipped a bad batch of GameCubes, which had faulty chips. Funnily enough, the bad GameCubes only affected Metroid Prime, where all animated objects freaked out. So why did it only affect Prime? That's because Metroid Prime worked the CPU too hard. It was running too fast. Nintendo had one dev kit that had the same problem, but in order to see the problem, the dev kit had to be freezing cold. So they did what any sane person would, and put the GameCube into a freezer for 15 minutes to try out new codes to fix it. Rinse and repeat. Why did the game run so fast? Most GameCube games use the lock cache DMA to read and write, but Metroid Prime skinning used the lock cache DMA to read in data and the write gather pipeline to write it out. What does this all mean? I have no idea, but more or less the game runs a bit faster with Jack Matthews' technique. Eventually they inserted NOPs into the code to slow the game down enough without tanking in-game performance. As for the people with a bad batch of Nintendo GameCubes and the older Metroid Prime disc, Nintendo would send them the new game disc with the updated NOPs, so the game can run perfectly normal. Number 8. There were 3 technical reasons as to why there are elevators in the game. Elevators have existed in Metroid since the first game and have become a series staple, so it's probably no surprise that they would include elevators in Prime as well. But they are also there to help the game to provide a smoother and more immersive experience for the player. How? The elevator may seem to connect 2 spaces, but in reality, it is actually a pre-rendered cutscene, a very fancy loading screen, and what it's doing behind the scene is it takes Samus to a different world map, because each world map have a size limit that operate on a floating point precision, and if Samus goes too far away from the origin point, her movement will begin to stutter, as the value between her and the origin is far too great. Another reason is the sound bank Retro used. Music X couldn't stream sound effects, so as you enter each world map, a sound effect gets loaded into the game. The final reason is the fragmentation purposes. Every time the elevator scene happens, the game is cleaning up the RAM to free up space. Number 9. Central Dynamo Power Bomb Maze have 300 different seeds. Zoid Kirsch wrote a program for the maze that would generate a random maze, and through all the random generated maze, he picked 300 seeds that at least required 75% of the maze to be traversed on. Number 10. The snow in Phendrana Drift had to be remade. The snow falling in Phendrana Drift would have looked so much more different if the developers didn't care about the game. The snow falling are generated through a random number generator, or RNG for short, and so the first version of the snow RNG looked a bit more empty as the snow fell. The team didn't like the first version at all, and so they made a better RNG via a linear congruential generator. Number 11. Test runs near the end of the development cycle improved the visual cues. Near the end of the development of Metroid Prime, friends of the developers' families were brought in to play the game, without any guide or help, or as they call it, white paper testing. It was with these tests that the developer were able to provide quality of life visual cues, such as bigger spotlights on the area to let player know where to go next. An example is the bridge leading to the Arboretum. Apparently the 2 back steps were nearly the same color, so it made it hard for test players to know where to go. The first batch of test players weren't able to see it, and after the developers watched and got lost, they changed the platform's texture and improved the lighting in the area. The next time they brought in a new set of test players, they were able to immediately find the steps. Number 12. If you gotta go fast on the Morph Ball, you might see these doors which are there to stop Samus falling through the void. Much like the regular doors, the Morph Ball doors are made to stop Samus from going into the next area before it finished loading, but initially they weren't there. The developers expected players to take their time in the tunnel, so the next room could load. But boy did they thought wrong, because some testers blitzed through the tunnel and it caused Samus to fall into the void forever. This is why we now have the doors in place. Number 13. Strafe Jumping. This is an advanced mechanic that was very likely unintended, but for those who looked up a guide or speedrun the game before, will very likely know this trick. Usually when the player locks onto a target followed by a jump, Samus will jump to the side and circle around her locked on target. But by abusing the mechanic and the game's code, Samus will unlock from her target and side jump in a straight horizontal line. This technique allows the player to acquire the space jump early, as the strafe jumping provides more horizontal coverage than a normal jump. Unfortunately, the space jump shortcut was removed from Prime Trilogy version of the game because they patched out the strafe jumping with the scan visor. Number 14. All the visors ran on 60 frames per second by using certain techniques or design. Metroid Prime 4 have 4 visors, the first being the combat visor view, so they had to make sure it ran smoothly. Second is the scan visor, which allowed Samus to scan multiple objects and environments for information of the world. They removed the gun, projectile and the lights from this visor. Then we have the thermal visor, which is used for finding heat signatures to find enemies and objects alike. They removed the static light map and the world lighting to keep up with the performance. Then finally we have the X-ray visor, which helps Samus locate invisible enemies and objects, and also see behind walls. The way they make it perform optimally is this visor runs on a lower resolution and is a bit blurred compared to the others. But what's most amazing of all is the fog you see. That is actually to hide the surrounding, so the game doesn't need to render far away objects at all, allowing the game to perform well. Number 15. Developer Zoid Kirsch unveiled a lot of Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion collection. On his Twitter page, Zoid Kirsch posted a memorabilia collection, and it is filled with many collectibles. Some I do have, such as the figurine and the badge, but others such as the sunglasses I've been looking for forever. Go over to his Twitter page and check it out. I have a link in the description. And with that, that's the end of the video. How many of these did you know? If you know 15 out of 15, you probably followed Zoid's Twitter too. But for those who doesn't, let me know which one you did know or didn't know. But for now, I gotta go. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video if you enjoyed this. Bye for now.